Are you considering buying Green Hell? In this video, I will give you a full review of the game, the pros and the cons, and everything you need to know before you buy Green Hell. But is Green Hell actually worth buying and playing? Let's find out. Iron Game Grader here. If you like real survivor games, then really take a look at this one. Green Hell takes place in the Amazonian rainforest. Because of that, everything around you will try and kill you. And Green Hell is an open world survival game with a big focus on realism compared to most other survival games. Eating the wrong food can poison you, wounds can easily get infected, and evil worms can bury into you, eat you from the inside if you sleep on the ground. There's also a big focus on the mental aspect of survival and loneliness. This can include anywhere from hallucinations to hearing voices, and these hallucinations can even kill you in-game. Now, Green Hell is on full release and costs around $20, which is actually quite cheap compared to most other survival games of this size. Now, day-to-day survival is the main part of the game, gathering resources, food, and crafting tools to help you combat enemies and starvation. The game is based a lot more on realistic tools and crafting components than most other survival games, and mistakes can have severe and even fatal consequences. Now, Green Hell does not have a progression tree like all the survival games. The progression is very different. It's a lot more focused on survival day-to-day basis. This can be a very slow and tedious progression, but can be very satisfying to the right player. Now, Green Hell can be extremely difficult to play. The game will not hold your hand. When you first start out, you will die many times, especially on the harder difficulty. Your choices matter a lot. The game focuses a lot on trial and error, so eating the wrong random berry can be fatal to you. And I would also highly recommend, if you're gonna buy this game, to not look up guides or tutorials, as this will remove the fun and challenging part of the game, which is the trial and error. So if you're looking for a more relaxed survival game like Graph, for instance, then this game might not be for you. It is possible to make it easier and more peaceful, but that's not really the concept of the game. The game is about difficulty and surviving on very hard mechanics. Now, the early game of Green Hell is a lot of trial and error. Dangers in Green Hell comes in all sizes and shapes. The berry you ate might not kill you immediately, but the dehydration from vomiting might kill you a week later. Combat is also a lot more rare than most other survival games, but on the other hand, it's also a lot more lethal, as you will die a lot quicker, and also if you are hit by something, you are more likely to die from infection. And the main enemies you will encounter are hostile natives that will try and kill you. Now, combat can be a bit clunky sometimes, similar to games like The Forest, but we'll get into that a bit later in the con section. Now, one of the coolest parts of this game is the nutrition system. The nutrition system has 4 separate requirements to satisfy, so already there is a lot more engaging than most games. In most games, you just eat food to get health back, or if there is some kind of starve meter or a food bar, you could just fill up on, for instance, berries forever. In this game, you gotta have a varied diet. You cannot just survive only on berries or worms. You have to have a balanced meal, and your health at any time is calculated on the sum total of those 4 nutrition stats. So your health is actually in a constant flux depending on the level of each nutritional component, and this is one of the main parts of the game, the constant daily grind to find food that will give you a varied diet. Now, Green Hell is not player friendly at all. It will not tell you how to craft stuff. It will not hold your hand. Throughout the entire game, and especially early game, you will die a lot as you figure out what berries are poisonous, how to not step on snakes, and how to do basic survival mechanics. But as you progress and you figure out more and more stuff by trial and error, the game is super satisfying if you're into that kind of content. If you find this video useful, make sure to boop the like button, as it really helps out the channel. Thank you so much. Now, Green Hell's visuals are fantastic. I personally love these graphics. They are very immersive and just gorgeous. Also, the sound and music design is super realistic and adds a ton to the atmosphere and the immersion. Now, Green Hell has 3 different game modes. You have story mode, survival mode, and challenge mode. And challenge mode usually requires you to complete a certain task or challenge over a set time limit. Survival mode is the main part of the game, where you focus on surviving as long as you possibly can. And then you have story mode, which is a lot like survival mode, but it includes story and more objectives. Now, what I also really like about the game is the option to play as you want to. So you have 3 different game modes, but you also have different settings. You could basically play the game on peaceful, turning off all hostile enemies, if you want a more relaxed playstyle. But I would recommend getting Green Hell for the difficulty and complexity. There are plenty of games out there if you want something easy and a game that holds your hands and tell you what to do, whereas Green Hell can be very difficult and challenging on the hard difficulty, but it will put you and your survival skills to the test, and this can be very satisfying if you are of course into that sort of game. Now, base building is also a lot more basic than most other games, and it'll take you a lot longer to build. You won't be building a massive structure like an Ark Survival Evolved, but it's very satisfying. You have to go around and place each individual part where it is supposed to go. You can't just hold down one button and it'll build it all for you. Now, the number of recipes and building is fairly small, and also the map is not very big, so early on in the game it feels like there's a vast and massive amount of content. This will however fade as you play the game more and more, and you will realize that it is a bit less than what you thought originally. Now, let's look at some pros and cons. So to start off with the pros, the game is super immersive. The atmosphere, the music, the graphics, it all ties into a very immersive yet challenging game, and when you also combine this with the mechanics of the game, you get a very immersive and realistic realistic game. I have played a lot of survival games in my time, and I have a hard time saying that there's a more realistic survival game out there, as Green Hill might be the most realistic and immersive game out there for survival. Now the game has a lot to do, but that is only if you enjoy the day-to-day survival aspects of it. Some players will look at this game and not be interested at all, as it won't be very flashy. It won't have some kind of progression tree where you start off with a little basic axe and then later on you can shoot fireballs from your ass. But if you enjoy this basic mechanics of the survival, you will absolutely love it. The environment and graphics are also fantastic, and this again ties into the whole immersion of the game, and you can really get stuck in the game for hours without noticing at all. Now let's look at some cons. The game can sometimes be very janky in controls and awkward combat. You'll sometimes fight an enemy, hit it with a spear, and you'll just get stuck running in place. Also, the hand-to-hand combat with enemies can feel a bit awkward sometimes, pretty similar to something like The Forest, where the AI just feels kind of forced. Now the overall game is also quite buggy in terms of the movement. The controls are weird, the AI can be very difficult, and also enemies can spawn inside your walls and buildings and destroy everything. And this can be awful for the immersion, which is one of the strong points of the game. So this can be very game breaking when it happens. Also, the game can completely break sometimes on co-op, where the native enemies will never spawn in, so the game just feels very weird and quite easy. Now let's grade the game, shall we? So the first thing we're looking at is gameplay. That is the most important aspect. You can get away with a lot of things as long as you have good gameplay mechanics and does the game work as intended. And in gameplay, I'm gonna give Green Hill a B. Now the mechanics and the systems are fantastic when it actually works. Unfortunately, the game is quite buggy and also controls are quite janky sometimes. Otherwise, this would be the biggest A+ of my life, but due to the cons and the mechanics failing quite often, it has to be a B. Next one we're looking at is the graphics, the sound, and immersion. Basically, you get these wow moments where the game just blows you away. And here, the game is absolutely fantastic and definitely deserves an A grading. The graphics are stunning, the sound is good and immersive, and the overall immersion of the game is absolutely fantastic. And this would be one of the biggest selling points of the game is the immersion. Now, the immersion will sometimes break, and it can be so annoying when it happens, but when the game functions as it's supposed to, you almost can't compare to any other games out there in terms of the immersion. They've absolutely nailed it on this one. And next one we're looking at is progression. Basically, does your effort feel meaningful? And here we're also grading the story. Now, I'd say the progression in this game is fantastic. Now, it's not as linear as in most games. You don't have a progression tree or a tech tree you follow, but the day-to-day basic survival and slowly building up knowledge, crafting tools, and constructing a base is absolutely fantastic. And it's also one of the biggest selling points of the game. Now, it can be very tedious and annoying, but also really satisfying. So in progression, I'm gonna give Green Hill an A. Now, this one is very, very subjective. For some players, this will be absolutely fantastic. For others, this will be awful. And the story is actually also surprisingly good. And I'd also recommend playing the story at some point if you're gonna play the game. And the overall grading of Green Hill is therefore an A. The game works as intended. The immersion is fantastic. The progression on day-to-day survival mechanics are amazing. Now, the game can overall be quite buggy, and there can be some janky controls, but if you're able to look past that, the mechanics are just too good. Now, the game won't be for everyone. You have to really like the survival mechanics. The game can be very slow and tedious, but the focus on actual survival skills is unlike most games. And this can be extremely satisfying to the correct player. When you first buy the game, it will be a struggle. You will die so many times, but it's absolutely worth it. If you're looking for a simple game that holds your hands and tell you what to do, the game is not for you. But on the other hand, if you're looking for a challenging, tedious, yet satisfying gameplay, Green Hill is fantastic with incredible survival mechanics and amazing immersion. So in conclusion, Green Hill is a survival game with a realistic setting, harder than most games, with amazing graphics and great survival mechanics. The game costs $20 and you can get tons of content and gameplay in this for $20. So for me, the game is absolutely worth buying and playing. But let me know what you guys think about it. Comment down below and also check out the video on the screen now, as I think you also really like that video. So I'll see you over there. Peace out, everyone.